Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live.
I feel this melody in the footsteps of the people, rising up in the rhythm of dignity and courage. When I see you, I suddenly believe liberation can flourish, and generosity and humility will save us. And we will use the love our mamas gave us to decolonize the skies above us with praises. Learning from the bravest, the beautiful, nameless creators of a world newly awakened. We on fire and blazing our way out the matrix, guided by a single mother's hand, holding her family together. We already on the other side of never. We're the aunties brewing tea and sipping sweetness from the south to the north. We are here to remind those in D.C. who they working for. That's right, beloved. This song is Freedom Uncovered.
Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody has got a right. Everybody's got a right to live.
What Harriet walked towards, what the people in Selma marched for, what the riots from Stonewall to Ferguson to Minneapolis fought for. A movement of people who pour in dollars but rich in brilliance. We are the millions, the healers who come to heal, the leaders who come to reveal that the right to live means you've had the right to feel what you feel. The right to live means an end to police violence and the passage of a Green New Deal. The right to live is in the wind, and every day we witness in our children's countless talents. The right to live is harmonizing in the voice of Yara Allen. It is the springtime and you can feel the right to live about to bloom, growing out the organizing of comrades like Sierra and Sharon and Claudia de la Cruz. Esto es el momento de pararnos como madres orgullosas y sonreír, porque no hay nada más esencial que el derecho de vivir. The right to live is a simple truth to return us to ourselves. It is a spell being cast upon a lost and divided nation to heal the wounds of hate and incarceration with a love so bold it includes everybody. Feel that, everybody. And when you fight for those rights, they become the lights for us to follow through these long dark nights. This is a promise to be radically honest and declare we are worthy of food to eat and housing to sleep in and schools to dream in and just being human beings. We are worthy of love. And so the Poor People's Campaign has come to bring our freedom into being. You will know we've arrived because you will hear us sing.
Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live.
So, welcome everyone, and it's a pleasure to speak here for the national effort on behalf of WILPF committees and the WILPF board to get people to turn out to the Poor People's Campaign March in June. That this may be an opportunity when the COVID risk will have reduced enough that people in masks can gather together and the world today is unpredictable. So that's part of the reason I would say the U.S. board is looking forward to a possible in-person meeting in Washington, D.C. in June, before or after the 18th. And that will be an occasion for WILPF US to be able to travel across the country to Washington or to their own capitals to commemorate that day. In California, I know that at this time, no in-person event is scheduled for Sacramento, the capital where I live. WILPF US is so united with the goals of the Poor People's Campaign. We work together to reduce defense spending with calls for a minimum of a 50% cut when we all know that we can't even get the defense budget to stay steady. Instead, it increases. It has not yet diminished year to year. Working with the moral budget, we can organize with the mayor's campaigns, with the many efforts across the country to change the direction of this country through greater participation in the elections this year. So all of us are here supporting the PPC, and I do apologize for, I thought I was on at 7 minutes after the hour. So thank you all.
Thank you for your words, Darian. I appreciate that. A few months ago, the branches were all invited to send in photos of any actions in which we participated with the Poor People's Campaign. And now we will see a really marvelous video made from those photos by Rowan Fairgrove.
Dr. William J. Barber II, President of Repairers of the Breach.
And I'm Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, Director of the Cairo Center, and we are co-chairs of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival.
We are proud to stand with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom.
WILPF, the oldest women's peace organization in the world, is proud to stand with the Poor People's Campaign as a mobilizing partner, as we have done since the inception of the campaign.
Somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long. Well, somebody's hurting my sister, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Oh, somebody's hurting my sibling, and it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long. Well, somebody's hurting my sibling, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. The earth is calling for healing, and it's gone on far too long. Yeah, it's gone on far too long. Oh, it's gone on far too long. The earth is calling for healing, and it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, has been clear in its commitment to shifting the moral narrative in this country to build lasting power for poor and impacted people. We believe that in order to transform our society in the image of justice, we must address the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic poverty, systemic racism, ecological devastation, the war economy and militarism, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We know that a part of healing this country involves addressing these policies and systemic structures that have allowed these injustices to hurt too many people, too many of our people, for too long. We hope you will join us in Washington, D.C. on June 18th, 2022.
That is, to me, an incredible video. I love it. Wave your hand if you saw yourself in the video. Yay. Thanks so much for that, Rowan. It was really fabulous. I want to say a quick welcome to Noam Sandwise-Beck, who is a member of the Poor People's Campaign, official member of the campaign, who is with us tonight. And I will let Reverend Rowan Fairgrove introduce our speaker.
Thank you. We are so blessed to have Reverend Liz Theoharis, co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, along with Bishop William J. Barber II. She is the director of the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice at Union Theological Seminary, one of the campaign's anchor organizations. Reverend Theo Harris is an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church USA and teaches at Union Theological Seminary in New York City. She came to the PPC from a career of working on poverty issues. Her 2017 book, Always With Us: What Jesus Really Said About the Poor, informs the campaign in many ways. In 2021, she edited We Cry Justice, Reading the Bible with the Poor People's Campaign. We're pleased to have her join us tonight to tell us more about the Poor People's Campaign mobilization for June 18th, 2020 and beyond, and how we of WILPF can be a good national mobilizing partner.
Awesome. Well, it's so great to be with everyone this evening. I was raised in a family that had a mom who was dedicated to the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, met the welfare rights movement when I moved to Philly, and worked with a lot of folks that were WILPF members then, and have been in the streets and in communities with so many of you over the past years, that it just is just amazing to me to get to be with such a powerful group of nonviolent, prophetic justice warriors that are out there, still persisting, still struggling, still holding out the hope that this is not as good as it gets, that we can indeed make the world in the image of justice. I thought that was a beautiful part of that video. So thank you for having me this evening. I do want to share a little bit about the recent mobilization efforts, and I want to put it in the context of the world that we all know we're living in, that is not the world that should be. But I was thinking some today about all of these interlocking injustices, but included in it how we as a society still seem to be living through the worst public health crisis in a century, and we haven't expanded healthcare. We seem to be having the largest attack on voting rights since Reconstruction, and yet no action, no motion to protect and expand voting rights. We are living in the richest country in the world, and more than half of our kids are living in families that are poor and low income. And yet, just a couple months ago, we passed a military budget with complete bipartisan support. That's $750 billion, more money than the Pentagon even asked for. And yet we still allowed for 61 million kids to stop receiving the child tax credit. And we have not passed a Build Back Better agenda, which was going to be just the initial tiny little step compared to the great sea of need that is out there. Now we have the likes of Senator Joe Manchin and others, talking about the need for work requirements, the need for means testing, and yet we don't hear any means testing when it talks about the military budget, right? There's no military work requirement, and what we know is that Congress is choosing to spend more money on guarding the world's oil supply than trying to fight climate change, right? We know that Congress is spending more on one single military contractor than on all preschool and childcare for like a year, right? We know that Congress is authorizing, $25 billion extra dollars on weapons the Pentagon didn't even ask for, even though it would take less than $20 billion a year to do these kind of child tax credits and poverty busting tax credit for families and for workers. And so, when that kind of reality is in front of us, what we know is that we have to come together, unite together, and figure out how we're going to build the kind of power necessary to, in the words of Reverend Dr. King, make the power structures of this nation say yes. Yes to healthcare, yes to education, yes to anti-poverty programs, yes to living wage jobs, yes to a guaranteed annual income, yes to women's rights, yes to LGBTQ rights, yes to immigrant rights, when they may be desirous, as they keep on showing that they are, of saying no, because that's what we're getting used to these days. And so I think it's in that context that we in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, are calling for June 18th. A mass poor people and low-wage workers assembly, a moral march on Washington and to the polls. And we're talking about this not just as a day, as a declaration of the kind of power that poor and low-income people are building, and the kind of permanently organized communities that we are struggling to reach, so as to be able to shift the priorities and the budget of this nation, the policies of this nation, the structures of society, to be around the needs and demands and priorities of the 73 million poor and low income women, the 140 million poor and low income people, the 26 million poor and low income Black folk, just all of these, not just statistics, not just numbers, but human beings whose lives and livelihoods are really at stake and don't need to be. And here we are in 2022, after a year of having politicians put into office who were elected because they said they were going to raise wages. They said that they were committed to addressing systemic racism. Folks put out the possibility of expanding healthcare, and so many of the kind of issues that are our deepest needs and concerns. And yet, despite there being a democratically controlled White House, Senate, and House of Representatives, we have not seen the kind of progress, the kind of investments in our democracy, investments in our children and childcare and preschool, investments in our healthcare and paid sick leave and dental care and vision and hearing for the elderly. We haven't seen those kind of investments. We haven't seen the kinds of policies that are actually really the solutions to the problems that people are facing. And so it means that we have to show the kind of power, the kind of unity that we're building, so as to, again, make those in power say yes to all of the needs, all of the demands of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, of the Domestic Workers Alliance, of the Fight for 15, of the Movement for Black Lives, all of the different movements that we all are connected to and represent. And we have to be able to come forward with power and shine a light on what is possible, what is necessary, and what we're going to keep on struggling to attain. Y'all know maybe that I'm a pastor and I'm a biblical scholar, and I have a favorite passage from the Bible. And I know folk are different religious traditions and not from religious traditions, but I think there's a story there that I fall back on all the time, and it's a parable of this woman, this persistent widow, whose justice she's trying to attain, and she goes to a judge. She goes to a packed court, right? That and she knows that judge, because he admits it, doesn't care about other human beings and doesn't give a damn about God, right? This is what this judge admits. This packed court, opens up to, and she says, "But I need justice." And she keeps coming, and she keeps coming, and she keeps coming, and she keeps coming, and she starts to bring her community, and she comes forward in power. And then this judge, he doesn't have a epiphany. He doesn't have a moment where he becomes the good guy. He doesn't just change his ways and become one in the struggle. But he says, because I'm afraid that this woman is going to give me a political black eye, and I don't think she's going to ever stop coming, because she joined up with the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom and a bunch of other freedom fighters that are out there. I'm going to make sure that this woman does see the justice that she is seeking, and she wins justice. Again, it isn't that he all of a sudden sees the error of his ways. And we are not expecting those in power to see always their errors of their way. But if they see the power, the persistence, and the kind of force of persistent widows, of folks all across this country, including on this Zoom call, who are just coming back, and we're not going anywhere. We're planted in the water. We will not be moved. We shall not be moved. And we're going to make sure that we see justice. We see it for us and our families, and we see it for our future. So that is what June 18th is about. We're talking about the largest in-person, socially distanced, safe, but in-person gathering of poor and low-income people in this country's history, and talking about building up a stage there on Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., for poor and impacted leaders from all across the country, all 50 states. That's who will be speaking in this assembly, and coming forward with our Third Reconstruction agenda, talking about the connections and the vision of coming out of our communities, whether it's around the right to water, whether it's about the rights of immigrant families, whether it's for sure cutting this defense budget by at least 50%, right? And investing that money in childcare and elder care and in health care and in all of the things that we need, as the welfare rights movement says, to thrive, not just barely survive. And so June 18th, it's a Saturday. We're hoping everybody and 50 to 100 of your closest people are going to come with you, and then 1,000 to 5,000 of people you never met before, but that you're going to organize to get there, can be there in DC on Pennsylvania Avenue. I've been really inspired the last couple of weeks reading about some of the folks, some of the unsung heroines of movements past. And I don't know if folk here have heard of Anna Hedgeman, but she was the only woman on the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedoms executive committee. And she was with the National Council of Churches at the time. And she single-handedly organized 40,000 people to come to the March on Washington. Now, we know that there were a lot of issues that happened where, women did not get to speak from that platform. And there were, but to see that kind of organizing, that one woman in her power, in her force, in her commitment, was able to turn out all of these different folk. I think, can we learn something from this amazing woman, and so many of the other freedom fighting heroines of our nation's present and history, right? So we're hoping to be able to have buses. We've already put on a website up that already has the partnership that we have with a bus service, not a company, because they kind of work with lots of bus companies in lots of locations. We already have about 50 places where buses are already organized to be coming from all over the country. We're looking to try to secure resources so that we can, really make sure that poor and low income folk are there, but also other people from all walks of life. The idea will be that for those that do come in the night before, we're planning to have a big dinner. We're planning to have a march of impacted folks and moral leaders and others, where we kind of remind the White House, remind Congress of our demands, and then gather the next day and hear the stories and hear the solutions coming out of as Frederick Douglass talks about, those who would be free must strike the first blow, from those that are facing eviction, facing homelessness, facing the lack of healthcare, facing poisoned water, facing all of the different issues that people are. And so, I'm here because we're really excited about, making this a generationally transformative, mobilization, organization, declaration, and assembly. And then we know that what we'll do is send ourselves back to our communities, because we're calling it a moral march on Washington and to the polls, because we also know that 1/3 of the US electorate is poor and low income. What we know is that in battleground states in the 2020 election, upwards of 40-45% of those who voted in those states that came out because they heard issues around living wages and investments in our communities were poor and low income people. And we know that when poor and low income people unite across race and geography around a moral agenda and a moral budget, that can shift the entire political calculus of the nation. And so, in 2020, we did massive peer-to-peer texting and phone banking. And what we know from that is that it made a difference. It was statistically significant, the almost 3 million people we reached. And we did that in ASL, American Sign Language. We did it bilingually in Spanish and English. We did it, to poor white people and poor Black people and poor Native people and poor Latino people and poor Asian people, and really, talked about, we are completely nonpartisan, but we are deeply political, and see the need to be able to build the independent political power of poor and low income people and all people of conscience who see that our interests are lifting from the bottom so that everybody can rise. And so we're hoping that not only do we get to partner with you all for June, but that we can also continue to work together in the work towards the midterms and beyond, as we keep on building up the kind of declaration, the kind of power, the kind of vision that is necessary to actually change things. So I'm sure you all, I want to open it up for questions, but I also want to kind of end with a favorite quote of mine from Coretta Scott King, because I know that she was indeed a powerful member of WILPF, and I think she gives a good framing for how we think about kind of interlocking injustices and intersectionality, and how we think also about this question of militarism and peace and justice, and how it all kind of comes together. Because shortly after she was talking to a journalist, shortly after Reverend Dr. King, her husband, was assassinated, and the journalist kind of commented about, what did she think about this violent act of her husband being shot, and she felt like it was important to kind of broaden the understanding of violence. That of course, that assassination, and especially since so many levels of those that were with power and authority actually were complicit in that assassination because he was trying to, unite the bottom. But she also broadened it and said, I must remind you that starving a child is violence, that neglecting school children is violence, that punishing a mother and her family is violence, that discrimination against working people is violence, that ghetto housing is violence, ignoring medical need is violence, and that contempt for poverty is violence, as well as
mobile.
As well as just this idea that the kind of apathy in the face of this kind of violence is also violence. And so I think to me, what's powerful about it is the need for us to kind of come together and organize, and to see that this is all connected, and to see that if we do truly want peace, we do have to work for justice, and that we must confront all of these different kind of forms of violence, and that's why we're excited to do so, with WILPF, and look forward to so much more work of us keeping on pushing and fighting. So thanks for having me. I'm looking forward for us to having some discussion, and I'm looking forward to us being in Washington, D.C. together.
Great. Reverend Liz, we certainly thank you so much for that. That was very tough your mother's influence on you as
I was listening to this
as a young person, and her association with WILPF. It's really exciting to hear also. And that is the greatest biblical story on the success of persistence for justice. That is just terrific. So those were great stories. If you are willing to take some questions, we can ask people to put in the chat questions. And Noam is here as well. So if you want to throw out any ideas, Noam, at any point, telling us about the other resources that the campaign has to offer, that would be wonderful. So we can open it up to any questions.
Emily, my hand is raised. So when you get to call them, thank you.
Go right ahead, Teresa.
Well, thank you so much. This is such a treat. The Southern Anti-Racism Network joined with Reverend Barber when he was Reverend Barber and president of the state conference of the NAACP branches in North Carolina. And we joined the HKLJ in 2006. And so we've been standing strong with him. I would like to lift up Fannie Lou Hamer. The Columbus, Georgia branch named our branch after Fannie Lou Hamer, who was a sharecropper, poor woman who was also a member of WILPF. And we are lifting up poor young women who are parents. And one of my biggest concerns in kind of poor people's efforts is that the poor people don't appear to be speaking and out front. Well, I spend my life working with the poor people in public housing, working for affordable housing, education, equity, and public safety, public health. And I think we really do have to make sure that this campaign is not about anything other than putting the voices of poor people out front to demand their justice. And I'd just like to know what will be the character of the June demonstration. Will the poor people be speaking?
Yeah, thanks so much for that question, because that's exactly what will be happening. We'll have at least a poor and impacted person from all 50 states, and that's who will be speaking. That's who will be. But what we say in our work, it's not just telling people sad stories, but talking about the plight of poor and low income people, the fight that we're waging in our communities, and the insight, the solutions to the problems that people are having, and not having people speak for poor people or about poor people, but having poor and low income people speak for themselves, for ourselves, because again, the whole theory of change here is that those that are most impacted by injustice must lead a movement. And that movement has to involve everybody, but must lead a movement, to really counter that injustice. And so I do want to make sure that folk here have a bunch of the materials that we have, including often I won't even speak until I've shown a video of other folks from the campaign, both talking about the kind of testimonies of where people are coming from, but also again the kind of agenda and demands that are because it's so important that we're not just kind of cursing the darkness we often will talk about, but shining a light on what's possible, but exactly who is helping to lead the work and who will be speaking, from the stage, the big stage on Pennsylvania Avenue on June 18th will be poor and low income people in all of our diversity.
Wonderful. I want to ask too about the COVID protections. That's been one of the concerns a lot of people have brought up. And I heard Reverend Barber talk about COVID safe buses the other day. So if you've got anything to add to that or details on that. So of course they cannot be 100% safe, but.
Yeah, exactly. So, so we're working with a group of amazing public health kind of experts and have been since really very early on in the pandemic, and folks that are coming from the point of view of both how do we ensure people's individual kind of health and safety, as well as what is necessary to kind of help heal the world from these from both the pandemic of COVID and then the pandemics of racism and poverty and injustice and marginalization that preceded and have been deepened by this pandemic. So we are working with folks to both figure out with the buses, for instance, the idea is not having a lower capacity in the buses, so same size buses but having fewer people in it, and therefore needing more buses so we can be able to fit all the people, but we'll be, as we have been doing in a bunch of the work that the Poor People's Campaign has been doing all summer, all fall, all winter, is making sure we have really high quality PPE, making sure that we have attention to keeping people at a distance from each other, so as to be able to both spread out and show our power even more, but also to keep people healthy and safe, or at least as much as possible. We're also working with folks to make sure that before people board those buses, before people come, that we're trying to make sure that vaccines and other kind of more preventative things are accessible to everybody, and that there's really strong public education around the many ways of kind of keeping people and communities safe, and then obviously the assembly itself, the Moral March itself, will be outside, but it's the kind of getting there that is kind of a little more tricky, as well as then keeping people apart. But again, we're what we have tried to do is to be even more conscious than what the CDC is recommending or anybody else is recommending, and rely on both that and the science, as well as these public health experts to like advise about everything from where the water coolers should be to like what kind of hand sanitizer and everything to be using, so as to be able to really try to keep this as safe as possible. And I think, as folks know, throughout this pandemic, we've had to make, like all of us, adjustments, as things change. And so, we had meant to be doing this in person 2 years ago, right? June 20th of 2020. And then we had to move online, and, we would plan to launch these in-person mobilization tour stops, and this month we're doing them all online. So we're trying to also make sure that we're very flexible, and especially based on public health recommendations. But what we are hearing is that hopefully in June, with these precautions and with the way that we're trying to organize it, it will indeed actually be safe to be there in person.
That is very reassuring. Thank you for that discussion. And Randy Webster has a question, I think.
Hi, Reverend Liz. I met you at the Moore Tour in San Francisco at a Chinese restaurant before the big Glide gathering. So it's really good to see you. My question is, going back to the buses, will there be buses for every state, and even as far away as California, where we're from? Because we are doing a lot of organizing in California right now. And as many details about transportation as you can offer would be welcome. Our first kickoff event is March 13th. And so we have 3 other events planned, major statewide events. And the first one is March 13th. And we would love to know about transportation.
That's great. So indeed we are talking about, and if people go to the website, I think we have a map that says already where there are buses kind of scheduled to come from.
Yeah, I've seen that.
And I'm trying to look right now and see if, but I know
I
that
just added the link in the chat, and folks can see.
Okay, perfect.
Yep.
And indeed, the idea is that there will be buses coming all the way from California. Again, I think we have, there's lots of dots on the little map. And then if you see a place that you live or are organizing people from that isn't a dot on the map yet, it's possible to basically organize enough of a community to be able to get a dot, which means get a series of buses, or at least a bus. We're trying to figure out, so the advantage of working with this Rally bus share program is that these folks that know how to organize buses and know how to make good deals with bus companies get to take a lot of that on, and that we kind of use the best of this kind of crowdsourcing and technology to be able to book these buses. But then a lot of the kind of details are then in whoever is signed up to be the bus captains of it, and kind of decentralizes some of that information, so that then you at your event can say, we have 3 buses coming from, they're going to stop at this place, and we know that that's how it's going to be, and you don't have to kind of rely on me saying that that's going to happen, and instead it gets worked out that way. The idea is that there will be buses coming from many, many, many places, and we can keep on adding more bus stops. And I also know that I have heard from our coordinating committee members and leaders in lots of different states that are trying to think about other ways of getting there as well. So for instance, when we were organizing towards June 2020, there had been this idea, because folks in Los Angeles were starting to organize amongst Uber drivers and Lyft drivers, that they were going to do a whole caravan. It was going to be part of an organizing drive.
Wow.
So I think there's some of this kind of creative juices that are flowing already, that were back then. I also know that some folks are trying to figure out, caravans. If people are familiar with the 1968 Poor People's Campaign that the Welfare Rights Movement and Dr. King and Mary Ann Edelman and others were behind, there were 9 caravans that, the most famous of one that comes out of Marks, Mississippi, the poorest town and area of the country. And that was a mule train, right? And it actually got to DC later than Resurrection City had started, but there was one from up in Oregon, there was in Washington, there were other ones from the Midwest, there were ones from like the more plain states. And so I think there's also some energy around organizing some caravans and making stops and making kind of a big deal. I know of some folks that are realizing that it's going to be actually less money and less time to fly, and trying to make, you know, both deals with the airlines, as well as you know, especially this much in advance, and thinking that that might be a better way to kind of organize people to get there. So I think there's going to be planes, trains, and automobiles all happening, and maybe other forms of transportation. But you know, I would encourage, if folks aren't already connected to the coordinating committee of the Poor People's Campaign in your state, to connect and reach out, because there are perhaps even more resources there with the leaders that are organizing on a state basis. But also, you know, we have toolkits up online and a lot of information. We're really trying to just get it out so that people can kind of see yourself as one of the kind of mobilizing captains for this, because we sure need a lot of folks to just kind of take up the call and organize.
Yeah, there is a lot of experience in anticipating the needs now, so you're doing a great job of that. One person has asked about, some of our members are older and with mobility issues, what kind of accommodations are being explored there? I guess the rally bus people may have buses for handicapped people. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think I think it's at various different levels, right? I mean, I think Rally.co, I mean, they have a bunch of experience working with accessible buses and accessible transportation, and know that a lot of the folks in our work need that. I think we're also again working with our coordinating committees and working with some different organizations to think about accessibility, to think about you know, how to make this open event for everybody, and accessible event for everybody. You know, for the assembly and Moral March itself, we're thinking, and we're working with different folks in Washington D.C. to make sure that, you know, we have both, you know, accessible porta potties, that we have seating areas for those that will need that the kind of terrain is open, so that wheelchairs and other mobility assisted devices you know, just fit right in. And you know, I think this is a place where we need all hands on deck, right? And so you know, and for us to each think about how we're going to make sure that the buses we're organizing and the delegations we're bringing and their needs are able to be met. And so so I think we are working, and we'll make sure that a lot of that is as we figure it out, you know, put on the website and in a bunch of the promotional materials. Just we will, you know, have Spanish translation. We will have American Sign Language. We'll make sure there's language access for many communities, because there's lots of ways of thinking about access, but we need to think about them all, because especially if we're talking about the 140 million poor and low income people, you're talking about lots of different needs and accessibility.
Absolutely. Wow. A lot of things to think about that we could all help you with.
True, right?
Yeah. Someone has asked, for people who can't come, will there be coordinated demonstrations in other places, or will it be, I guess there'll be a virtual component, will there?
There will surely be a virtual component as well. I mean, we're both hoping that some different news networks will live stream it, but then we also will, right? So that folks can both, you know, gather or not gather, and participate, and we are, you know, we want there to be a really strong showing in person, and we want a really strong showing of people that are joining virtually, because because we know that not everyone's going to be able to make it. But anyone that can, we're hoping will come in person and really be there in the numbers. But there has been some conversation about whether, some local communities will also have kind of simultaneous events. I don't know how that all is playing out. I think, but I do know that there will be a very strong virtual component, including with, people being able to take action, send, demands and our agenda, to elected officials, kind of beam it out more, what's going on, and really try to make everybody feel like they're a part of this really big historic piece that's going on.
It sounds awesome, and I am thrilled to participate. And Noam, did you have some things you wanted to add as well? Other resources or things you'd like to add? She's been very complete.
The problem about following Reverend Liz is she's very thorough and inspiring. Thanks, Reverend Liz, and thanks, Emily. Not much to add. I dropped in the chat the website. I'll do it again. And this is, at least one place right now where folks can find a lot of the information that Reverend Liz was talking about. So it's in the chat here. And there you can find, information about the buses. You can find information about how to register yourself and your friends for to become a mobilizing delegation and a mobilizing captain. There's some more information about some of the context and history that Reverend Liz was talking about. So you can check that out. And there's a digital toolkit, just a whole bunch of the resources that I think are at your disposal. So yeah, you should check that out. And otherwise, I don't have more to say. We're so excited about WILPF's participation. The Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, I think, has been just really one of the most stalwart partners of the Poor People's Campaign for the last 4 years. And as Reverend Liz was saying, that comes out of decades of history. So it's good to be amongst family tonight.
That is very kind of you to say. We really have a strong history of participation, I think, and we are excited to be able to do this hopefully in a big way. We can't thank you enough for being here. I'm sure you're both tired and in need of some rest. So if you would like to leave, we can certainly let you do that. Or if you'd like to stay, you're welcome to do that as well. We are going to have a quick video break here, I think, to look at another one of the marvelous videos from the movement, just for 1 minute, and then we'll be right back to have some WILPF people talk to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Both of you.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise. Listen to our cries through the pain and lies. Our people gonna rise. Our people gonna sing.
Our people gonna sing.
Our people gonna sing. In spite of everything, hear our freedom ring. Our people gonna sing. Our people gonna fight. Our people gonna fight for what we know is right. March into the night. Our people gonna fight. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Whatever you believe, we have the right to breathe. Our people gonna breathe. Our people gonna pray.
Our people gonna pray.
Our people gonna pray. Take our rights away, see you on election day. Our people gonna pray. Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise.
Our people gonna rise. Listen to our cries through the pain and lies. Our people gonna rise.
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 One of many. from the campaign. And right now, I think we're going to ask George Friday to tell us why she thinks WILPF should be involved in the Poor People's Campaign from her own perspective and experience. George.
Good evening, Sister WILPFers. I'm glad to be here, part of this great kickoff for June 18th, 2022. Well, actually, I want to share a little bit about my experience with the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And I hope that you can see parallels to where we are as WILPF US, and that you take this recording with your branches, and it can be a teaching piece, both for people to think about getting on a bus or organizing people to get to June 18th, and also thinking about what's going on with our branches and our organization as a whole. In the beginning of the Poor People's Campaign, and I encourage you, I know someone put the website in the chat for the Poor People's Campaign. If you haven't spent any time there, and I don't mean just going and looking for some pictures or an article or a flyer or a video, but spending time on that website. On the first page, you'll see about the Poor People's Campaign. The Poor People's Campaign, the fundamental principles is what you'll see first, and they are incredible in terms of reading and getting the sense of how this began. And folks earlier who've spoken talked about some of those key evils that the campaign has taken on. And you can see them behind Mary Brickert Jenkins' background there. Poverty, racism, ecological devastation, the war economy, and militarism. And now the distorted moral narrative. From those principles, folks, we had the 14 priority areas. And back in the day, I know when Ms. Teresa Elamine was talking earlier and mentioned HK-on-J in North Carolina, there were 14 points there that were focused on at every HK-on-J. There are 14 key policy priorities that you'll see under the About section. And one of the many things that makes what the Poor People's Campaign is doing at this moment important for what the moment is for WILPF US is where we are in terms of the themes of the work. In the beginning, the theme was, and we heard a song about this tonight, someone's hurting our people and we won't be silent anymore. Someone's hurting our people. Someone's hurting our brothers, hurting our sisters. We can't be silent anymore. That's one of the reasons that WILPF US has to show up. That's one of the reasons we have to show up for each other in this organization. We can't be silent anymore. After about 12 or 18 months, and the MORE tour, which included excellent training about civil disobedience, it wasn't called civil disobedience, it was something much groovier and a little euphemistic, but I can't remember it. Then it began, the theme began, we are a new and unsettling force. And that new and unsettling force is all of us, or many of us within WILPF too, that are creating a sense of change and discomfort. I have a lesser known maybe quote from Miss Fannie Lou Hamer that I used to think described me in the world. I'm not going to say it exactly, but as I remember, it was something like the whole world and America is upset. And the only way to bring about change is to upset it more. And there was a time in my life, I don't know if I'm there now, as I'm older, that I thought my raison d'etre was to upset shit. And the new and unsettling force that we have become and are with the Poor People's Campaign that will show up on June 18th is a new and unsettling force. You'll also see under that About on the website, I'm telling you, spend some time on the website, is the demands, not the requests, not the goals or wishes or hopes, demands. A new and unsettling force makes demands. We're going to June 18th, and Liz Theo Harris said it. It isn't a day, it's a declaration. It's throwing down the gauntlet and saying we're not going back, we're not backing down, we are here, and you better pay attention. And that is where we need to be, because we can't not be there. Now, the best part, and the next journey we have together, united in this fusion movement, not a moment, but a movement, the Poor People's Campaign, is the Third Reconstruction. I'm going to put, maybe when I'm done, I will put the link to that part of the website in the chat, because that's where we're moving into, and it's very important. It's about lifting from the bottom up, because if you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. But the language that describes the Third Reconstruction talks about transformation. And that's what is essential, y'all. Transforming, and it says a changing, structural change in this country. Structural change, not surface change, not a little bit of change, structure, deep, at the root. That's where you got to go if you really need something to transform. And to transform poverty, to transform systemic racism, also white supremacy, same thing, to transform ecological devastation, to transform the distorted moral narrative, and to transform what is happening with war and militarism, which we know much too much about in this circle. It requires deep transformation. It requires being unsettled. It requires demands. And I'll close with one of the things that I think is so awesome about Liz Theo Harris and Reverend Barber as a team. A month, maybe 6 weeks ago, we had a session with Reverend Barber that was talking about Build Back Better. And it wasn't going so well. It looked pretty dismal for passing. And he said he kept talking to press people and some of our colleagues, or his colleagues, about, you know, if you're not winning now, and what are we going to do, and what's the due date, what's the deadline for people to do things? And he said the deadline is when we win.
Mm-hmm.
You don't stop, you don't give up until you win. And, you know, Reverend Liz Theo Harris' story about that. So that's where we are. Hopefully united. Hopefully we move forward together, because we can't afford to move one step back. Thank you.
Very inspiring, George. Thank you for that. Yeah, the deadline is justice, I think. So really powerful statement. Thank you for your sharing some of your experiences with us. And now we're going to have Mary Bricker Jenkins talk to us a bit about the history of WILPF association with this Poor People's Campaign. Thank you, Mary.
Good evening, everybody. And George, that was so well done. Thank you so much. Now, I'm going to talk about history. This is history class, so there will be a test at the end of my presentation. Pay attention, please. I also want to say hello to, I won't name you, but so many of you with whom I've worked over the decades, and at least one of you with whom I shared a jail cell. So good evening, especially to the jailbirds in the room. So in December of 2017 was the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's call for a Poor People's Campaign. He called us to unite across the lines that separate and divide us, to end the interlocking injustices of militarism, racism, poverty. And today we know we've had to add ecological justice, and were he here today, he would do so. So that was December of 2017. Having been around for a while with the Poor People's Campaign and the movement to end poverty, I knew it was coming, and I asked Mary Hanson Harrison, who was then our WILPF US president, if we could seek partnership with the Poor People's Campaign.
She was eager to unite with the campaign's mission. She saw that the campaign's goals spanned, embraced, and advanced our many and varied programmatic concerns, driving our attention to the very thing that George just mentioned, driving our attention and our action to their root causes, which are intertwined. So after some discussion with the board, she appointed me as a special liaison to the campaign. We signed the organizational endorsement with the Poor People's Campaign on January 22nd, 2018. Here it is. This is it. This is the official endorsement that we signed in January of 2018. So in turn, because I believe in collectivism, I recruited an ad hoc WILPF for PPC committee, which studied the campaign documents and led WILPF through the 2018 40 days of action. The members of that ad hoc committee were enormously committed to being educated organizers. And so we led with our minds as well as our hearts and moved with whatever part of our bodies we could move. So many of us actually risked arrest, and Mary H.H. actually led our delegation to the culminating rally in DC in June of 2018. We continued to study the campaign documents and build participation over the years, and had a very substantial participation at the 6/20/20 event, which was online, and had, I believe, almost 1 million people. We were among the millions. Nancy Price had joined me as co-liaison, and Jan Korteman had signed on as media coordinator and created an absolutely marvelous collage of WILPFers involved, engaged in the movement. In 2021, I asked Dorothy Van Soest to take over as the liaison position, and her education and organizing work has kept us engaged and well informed as the campaign brought thousands into the work of building this movement of our time. Now Emily and her team will unite us with each other and with this campaign, and carry us one way to another to DC. One thing that's terribly important for many of us who have been brought up to do good in the world, and to be good in the world, it's not about those people. This is not a pity party for the poor. It is our commitment to turn our pain into power, to end poverty, racism, militarism, ecological devastation, and the false moral narrative that sustains those. Of course, we can change the world. It's been done. It's now our turn to do it. So the question now to all of you, true or false, I will be in DC or in a support network action on July 18th of this year, 22.
June 18th.
And I will do everything I can to ensure that WILPF and our friends and neighbors are there, true or false.
Thank you, Mary. That was very nice. It's June 18th. I'll remind
Oh,
everybody. June 18th. That's okay. Right. You'll hear more about it. Everyone will know the date intimately when we finish. And thank you so much for that, Mary, for the history and for all you've done to put us where we are now. And Reverend Rowan is going to say a bit about a few other details. Rowan?
Hi. So there are some things coming up. We've mentioned and put the organizer's manual in the chat, and that has all kinds of useful things. But I really wanted to talk about the song challenge. I know a lot of our branches have gaggles of raging grannies. along with it. And one of the things about the Poor People's Campaign is arts and theomusicology are integral to our work. We always start with music, we end with music, we have music because it's a really powerful thing. And so there are monthly song challenges between now and June. This month, it's Up Over My Head. Next month, it's A New Unsettling Force. In April, it's Somebody's Hurting My Brother. And in May, it's Rise Up, If I Had a Hammer. And in June, it's New Unsettling Force. And so if you have musical people in your life, we're asking, and you can go look at the Poor People's Campaign YouTube channel because we've done song challenges before, and it's so inspiring to see people who step up to these challenges and do music in their own style with their own groups or solo. It's amazing. And so I would love to invite your branches to get your granny gaggles and your musicians and join in the song challenge. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's see, Rowan, are we going to have a recording of this available for view later? Someone asked.
Yes, we are. It will be on the WILPF San Jose channel pretty quickly, and I'm told it will then go onto the national WILPF channel.
Okay, great, great. And the video of our branches photographs is available on the WILPF San Jose website now, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, and the link was in the chat.
Great. Oh, great. Okay, thank you. I just want to say a few final words. We want our members to reach out to build this movement, not just from our WILPF membership, but your allies in social justice. Talk to the Fight for 15 organization in your state, to the labor unions like the Service Employees International, the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, your faith communities about building momentum for June 18th, or about sharing buses. There are events coming up in multiple states that you can attend in person or virtually. You can look in the chat for those state rallies. Our solidarity goal is actually to get to the June 18th rally in DC, but it is helpful to support the state events too. Making a donation to your state Poor People's Campaign committee might help provide a bus ride for a person of low wealth, so consider donating locally or even fundraising. And you can look in the chat here for how to find your state Poor People's Campaign organization and to join that. This campaign is intimately linked to voting, the other solidarity action chosen by WILPF members for 2022. Poor and low wealth people, as you heard Reverend Liz say, are 30% of the electorate and 45% of the electorate in battleground states. They are being inspired to intensify their efforts, and with more outreach and organizing and voting, their power will be felt. WILPF can be a part of that mobilization as well as we work on voting access and actions. Evaluation of the policy priorities of the Poor People's Campaign shows that WILPF places a high priority on similar areas, often found in the function of our many issue committees. As an example, the Poor People's Campaign states that redirecting the bloated Pentagon budget to the needs of the people is a matter of national security. Our Disarm Committee advocates for moving the money to human needs. Our Women, Money, and Democracy Committee educates us in the reality of the rigged economy, the economic injustice, the runaway inequality, the unfair tax system. Earth Democracy's advocacy of clean water and sustainable food production for all people without the interference of corporate interests dovetails with the PPC's interest in climate resilience, energy efficiency, and socially beneficial jobs in low-income communities. Advancing Human Rights has several subcommittees that study and support such areas as immigration policy reforms and reform of the criminal justice system, anti-racism, all valuable parts of the PPC campaign. We see our own goals and WILPF reflected in this mass movement to change the moral narrative of our nation and raise all of our people from the bottom up. I feel called to join them, and I hope you feel that also. You'll continue to hear from our committee on events in your state, both in person and virtual, ways to donate time and money, ways to commit to recruit other organizations in your area, and the logistics of organizing your branch to get to DC. Reverend Barber has said we need people that will decide that it is our moral obligation to stand up now. And I feel that for WILPF members, it is our moral obligation to do what we can to make this force for justice wield the power that we know it can. Thank you so much for your time and attention tonight. Anything else want to be said by committee members or Rowan? If not, we're going to have a nice video on the way out. And thank you everyone for coming. We appreciate your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Emily. Wonderful job. Thank you, Rowan. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mary.
You all passed the test.
Yay.
A+.
We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. When you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Yes? Would you sing that with me? Okay, I'll sing the line, you sing it back to me. We have come to liberate you from all the ways that you hold us down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Now you. Everybody rises, that's right. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. You. Poor folk are the first to suffer in this war economy. But I'm your daughter, I'm your mother. We're a chosen family. All together, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Woo! When you live from the bottom, everybody, ooh, sing it again. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises, that's right. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Hear this. We need air that's clean to breathe. We need water we can drink. You might say that we are weak, but we are stronger than you think. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Okay. So now when I say we have come to liberate you, it's because liberation is not something they're giving to you. We do not march to the Capitol so that they will give us liberation. That is not how liberation works. we say we are here to liberate you, we are saying that when they hurt us, when they hold people down, they too are wrapped up in this evil, and we are saying we are here to free you from it. That's the gospel, my friends. That is the gospel. So let's sing that again. And remember that next time you march to the Capitol, y'all, that we are not there asking for something from them, that we are going there to give something to them. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sing with me. We have come to liberate you, sing. From all that ways you hold me down. When you hurt me, you hurt you too. When you free me, you free yourself. You free yourself. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Yeah. You live from the bottom, everybody rises. One more again. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Oh, when you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody. Now just y'all, sing it out. Everybody. Yeah. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Keep it up, y'all. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. Last two times now. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. When you live from the bottom, everybody rises. All right, bring that message to them, y'all. Let's free some people. Peace.